Hi everyone, welcome to my Shoreline Studio. I'm Sybille Muschik. Today we're talking about shapes. And of course, many times if you've had art classes, your teacher has talked about masses. And what does that even mean, painting the masses? Well, they're talking about shapes of things. And I have an example here for you. Well, this is a photograph that we'll be working with on the gel plate today. And basically, it's only about shapes. The colors are very simple and there's not much detail. And so these are these masses we're talking about. So an artist that was particularly good at this kind of thing was Georgia O'Keeffe. She did all these wonderful flowers and large skeletal shapes, huge clouds in the sky and things of that matter. She was always painting the masses. And that's what we're going to focus on today. Not so much detail, not so much about color or texture. We're going to be painting these wonderful shapes. And as a result, you're going to have a pretty interesting composition. And I just wanted to talk about my tools as usual a little bit. Here's some of the brushes we'll be using because we're continuing on with the painterly monotypes. So some of my brushes are the Winsor Newtons, the University Brights. These are, and this I think is a Grumbacher. So this is a rigger, by the way. A rigger is a long brush with long hair, and it's usually used for calligraphy. Graphic designers use this a lot for doing lettering and so forth. Okay, so as usual, we'll be using our open acrylic, acrylic paints, Golden Open, and our trusty Beren and Brayers. A bit of water and some open medium. And of course, got to talk about the paper. Now, I did a bit of a search about the paper because to do the painterly model prints, you really have to have a heavy-duty paper. So this is a 98-pound Canson mixed media. I'll just show you this, and you can just rip out the pages out of the sketchbook. And it has a nice, not too much of a tooth, it's fairly smooth, and one side is smoother than the other. So we're using the more smooth side because we want our shapes not to have a lot of texture. Okay, so onto the plate. All right, here's our setup. As usual, 8x10 plate. We've already talked about the brushes and the paper. And I have a couple of little palettes. Colors, primrose, yellow, probably orange, and this is alizarin crimson. This is magenta, so is this, and ultramarine blue, and phthalo blue down here, and phthalo green, and can't remember. Oh, this is cerulean blue. Okay. So there we go. Now, what do we do first? Well, we're going to roll out our background color, and this will tie everything together and make the shadows work. And I'm not going to put a stencil to block this out this time, so I have done that in the past. I'll show you some of the, at the end of the video, as we usually do, we'll show some of the previous work. Okay, so let's get busy. I'm just going to use my little painting knife, and we will put a little bit of the magenta on. We want this fairly transparent, so don't put a lot of color on if you're working along with me, and I hope you are. Okay, and maybe a little bit of the diazazine violet in here, ever so slight. I'm not going to put the white on because white makes it more opaque and then we can't see what's underneath. So perhaps a little bit of the ultramarine blue. And then let's roll that out and see. We might need a little bit more paint, but I think it's going to be good. we're just covering the whole thing up. And our usual little rolling it around. Maybe a little touch more of the violet as we come forward, and blue. Make that a little bit darker. I've put a bit of a glow on the top there. I think that's quite nice, so that will show through. The underlayer is quite important because it sets a stage, if you like, for the rest of the work. So if that's not working for us, then we really have a problem. We'll change paper and start from scratch. But by brayering it off, I can see the color we're getting, and it looks not too bad. Just make sure there's no funny things on there, fuzzles. Just making sure it's relatively smooth. Okay. Keep your fingers crossed that this is going to print nicely. And just keep something out of harm's way here. Uh-oh. There we go. Speaking of harm's way. All right, we're fine. Okay. We've glued down the surface with our hand, and now the beren is to put some weight into this. Stick that down again. And it should print. Ooh, it's beautiful. All right, so you can see. Now I'm not going to actually wipe anything off either. What we're going to do is just paint white on top. And we're just going to paint white on the entire flower. What that will do is we'll pick up a little bit of the violet, like a shadow tone. By the way, I'm working on my light table. One of the ladies from the Gelatin Printing Enthusiasts mentioned that it was better to have your work on a light table, so we're trying it out, and I think it works really well. So I'm not too worried about the brush strokes here. We just want to pick up a little bit of this whole shape. Okay. I'm being fairly generous with the white, especially as we're getting to this. You'd be surprised how little it prints. So we're going to get, we might have to redo the layers here bit by bit. And so I've just covered the entire shape of the lily. This is the common water lily that we have in the lakes here. It's an indigenous species. And I think it's very beautiful. Okay. So you see what I mean about where it just picks up some, but what it does is it brightens the violet so that we can now add the yellow on top. We might need to do it again. We will see what happens. In the meantime, we're going to start working on the greens. I'm just going to, by working on the rest of the lily pads, this will dry a little bit. Oh, there's a little bit of a spot in there. And then I can add the next layer of white, and then we'll start getting into the yellows. But you can see the shape taking effect already. So taking a bigger brush and I'm just going to wet it a little bit. I've got water beside me. So now we have to consider some of our shapes. Now what's not very obvious is that the lily has quite a shadow here. We're going to just, this is a beautiful shape actually, but it's quite a different color. So we're going to leave that pretty well violet, I think. So what I'm going to do is, I probably won't paint it very much. We'll paint this dark shape and the lily pads. And then if we leave this as a violet shape, maybe a tiny bit of color, we'll get the shadow shape without working too hard. And I'm all for that. So let's do this dark area first. And we've got a bit of a, maybe I'll take my brush again and we're going to just put that white. It's just a reflection of the edge of the water there. A little bit here too, and there's a little bit of a water puddle here. I'm not sure we're going to mess around with that much, but okay, and that will just be underneath. So let's mix our dark. So it's going to be pretty well all the colors that we're going to use, and I'm not really using a green. I'm going to mix for green except for when we're darkening it, and I have some phthalo green there. So we're going to use our ultramarine. That's a fairly deep color, and a little bit of the phthalo. That cools it down a bit. And we will use some of the alizarin crimson. You can see it's starting to darken pretty well. If we want to make it more gray, then we add some yellow to it, which we can. And a little bit more of the violet. That's about as dark as we want it. The water in the photograph is very dark. When we were paddling out in the lake, of course it's far more transparent. We could actually see all the growth, all the frondy weeds and things all the way down to the bottom. The lake is fairly clear at the moment. So we're just going to start. And I'm going to do brush strokes pretty well just down. Remember, we're doing shapes and we're keeping it simple. We don't need a lot of fussy little strokes. And we'll run a few lines across just to give that movement of the water. Otherwise, it could be just about anything if it's a dark shape. Okay, just finishing off here. I'm going to have to reload my brush and right, so we're going to have to reload a few things here. Just some of the same colors. Touch of the, which is fine. We just blend it a little bit. I was really originally going to talk about blending in this video, but you'll see that as we go along. So I'm just blending it. The open acrylics, as I've said before, are a lot like oil paint. I don't know if anybody remembers Helen Van Wyck. She used to teach oil painting a long time ago, ages me. But she was a marvelous teacher and was one of the first teachers I viewed on television. And she said to blend things in oil, and of course in this kind of thing, is to make it and break it. So you do the mark, for example, like this, and you butt the other mark up against it, and then you move it back and forth, so that's the making and breaking it. Very effective. So now I guess we will just do a few lines across just to give it a feel. I'm not even sure this will show up, but we know that we've done this. And it gives it the essence of water, which is all we're really concerned about. Now I've covered up our shadow, and I'm hoping that this first layer is not going to print too much, because we already have that violet layer down, and it's dried a little bit while we were painting. But sometimes if you get too much paint on your paper, it will not pick up subsequent layers very easily. Something to be aware of working at this size. I'm just going to take a peek to see if how well it printed. Okay, it's not bad. We're going to need one more layer because it's a little bit brushy looking. So, but I'm going to leave it for now, let it dry a little bit, and then we're going to be okay. Yes, and I will repaint that little white area for that highlight. So now we're going to start on the leaves. See, it does go fairly quickly when you're doing shapes, masses. I'm going to clean my brush, but not terribly well. Remember, it's always good to coordinate your colors by having a little bit of color in your brush. Not so much that you're going to have muddy colors, but enough that, you know, there's going to be a hint of the previous color in there. Now I'm going to need some, that's the primrose. I just want to put some hands of yellow opaque so that our leaves are going to show up really well. And cleaning as we go, typical. I don't know how I got blue on me, but I did. Look at that. Okay, that's why we keep handy wipes handy. Okay, good stuff. Now then, we're going to start, just mix. I'm going to put down some open medium. We want this to be fairly fluid. I don't want a lot of brush strokes in the leaves. It's just going to be distracting. So the yellow. The primrose is fairly greenish already. I'm going to add just a hint of phthalo. It's extremely powerful. And just a touch of the cerulean blue. In this background, I'm going to paint them just in the photograph. It's a bit lighter, but what I want is the light down below and darker behind the flower to set off the flower. So artist prerogative, you do what you need to do. And more of the phthalo just to cool it down and push it into the distance. Maybe just a touch of the violet. There we go. So that grays it down a little bit. Okay, so I'll start from this end. You can see it's a lot more fluid. Not quite like a watercolor, but enough. And I'm just going to carefully brush around and then pick it up. There's not a lot of detail on these leaves. The veining isn't obvious except underneath the leaves, and we haven't got any of those. So it's pretty well a straightforward shape. We can make it as interesting as we like, but we don't want a lot of texture here. We're just going to... Okay, now next side. I don't know if you're seeing this, but there's a wee bit of a hint of a light spot there from the water, a reflection on the water. So I'm going to actually paint this quite considerably darker in here. And I'm not sure, we'll debate about whether we put that light spot in or not. I think it's just going to distract. So we're going to add a little bit more violet to this. Pick up some of the color that we've used and a little bit more green. And then start dipping into our yellow. So that's going to be considerably darker. Just keep working until we get the right color. And I'm just gonna sort of a khaki color and brighten it up a little bit more. And maybe add a touch of the, yes, that's that quinacridone magenta. Now let's put it down and see what it looks. Yes, look at how nicely dark it is. We're just going to run that around the... And there's a puddle where the water has come over top of a lily pad. And that's a bit lighter. Goes all the way to here. And I'm just going to run it around the flower a little bit. We want that to be fairly dark. Okay. Don't overwork your brush strokes, just keep working your way down. Like, don't keep doing this kind of thing, right? Nice, clean brush strokes. The more you use, brushwork on the paint, the muddier and nastier it becomes. I'm just going to change color here because we have this puddle there, so it's going to be a little bit more on the... I'm going to add a little bit of blue to that. Take some of that color. So it's basically the same color, just maybe a tone lighter. And we'll bleed that around the lily here. And that will be our little puddle here. In one of the pieces, I actually didn't even paint the stem. I wasn't sure it was relevant, so I left it out. It's all artistic license. You'll see that at the end of the video. I guess that puddle ran all the way to there. There we go. Now we'll take that smaller brush and put that little puddle back in there. Right, so I'm going to just wipe back here. Just one stroke, add a little bit of white to it. And then we're going to wipe back on the edge of this puddle. Now I'm going to have to lift up because I can't see it anymore to see where it is. Okay, Okay, it touches the top here, so we're going to start it there. And just add a little bit more of the white to it. Probably won't show up that well, but, and there's some of it here. The water has a surface tension, and so it sits a little higher. The puddle itself, it's not flat. It has a little bit of a bow to it. And if you look at puddles and things, study them, you'll see this phenomenon yourself. It pays to be a nature buff. Let's print this and see where we are. I think by now our white on the lily has dried, or at least sufficiently sunk in. And we can also redo that dark layer. So we have our base coat of the green. It's very violet still. That's okay. Well, let's just let that dry a little bit. And then we're going to take a little bit more of the intense opaque colors. I might mix some white with the green just to be more opaque. But for now, let's leave that. Let's do this part again. And we just smooth it out a bit. And I'm going to intensify the color a little bit. Lots of ultramarine blue. Which will, as big a brush stroke as I could have changed even brushes to a bigger brush. In this case, we're going to just add a tiny bit of the medium. It might take us 2 or 3 layers before we get what we want. But that's the joy of this kind of thing. You just step by step, process by process. And now I'm outlining the shadow for the lily. Okay, more blue, maybe even some phthalo in there. Phthalo is a very intense color. It's staining. You have a devil of a time getting out of your plate, but it's a beautiful color and a very useful one. So I'm just going to soften the brush strokes. Sort of that blending by making it and breaking it. I'm just lightly sort of, just a feather touch. And we'll see what happens with that. Oh yes, see the difference? That's quite lovely, and we even have some of those side strokes from before. Right, we are very happy with that. In this case, I am actually going to wipe out some of the previous color on here. Just so we have a nice bright palette to work on for the laying the yellow color down. See how it prints anyway. So starting with usually you when you paint, you should be painting your middles, your middle value. Haven't really talked that much about values in this particular one, mostly about shapes, but value is important here too, because without the values, the darks against the lights, you don't have a really good design, and it's important that we work on that. So I'm just going to the general shape. We'll put some details in at the very end. So all the lightest areas will get a coat of color. So that's this part. A little bit more yellow. It's not that easy to see it through the plate. By wiping that away, of course, that's helped considerably. Wiping the previous white layer away. And there's a little bit of an edge here. And a little bit of an edge on that side. So I personally find this painterly process very interesting and a lot of fun. I guess I just like messing with paint. Let's print that before anything else happens. I can't say enough that painting is therapeutic. It just takes you away to another world. And look at how the violets are informing the shapes. It's just lovely. Okay, we could have, that section could take a little bit more white in the middle there. We might have to wait again. Some of this is almost like watercolor, where you're going to have to wait for a bit, or it's not going to print. So and I think that works pretty good. Print.
6.5 when we're done.
Okay. Yeah, that's better. All right, so we're printing this, the lighter sections, yes, some of the highlights, and then we're going to put in the darks. And I think we've got the center now. I think that's good. Again, we're working more with the middle tones. The highlighted areas, that's probably not going to be the final tone yet, so there'll be one more touch. So now I'm going to add a little bit of the orange to this one. And to see if we can't get that darker shade that's on the inside of the flower. This is more of a middle yellow. So a bit of mixing going on. I think that's good. You always, painting is a lot like a performance and a play, where you're always exaggerating. Your marks are bigger, the colors are more intense. You know, you're always, you know, you're projecting your voice, painterly voice more. So. And here are the bottoms. Again, the blending. So I'm doing the Helen Van Wyck situation here. I'm making it and breaking it. So here's that piece. And there's some base pieces here that are catching the light. And let's see how that works. I think that's the calyx here is darker as it's going around. Let's print that and see what we have. We might have to wipe all that off so I can see the details for the end of the flower. Okay, we're getting really carried away here. We're getting excited, that's what's happening. The things are coming to a conclusion, so that's why I'm throwing stuff around. And you can see it starting to come together. I'm going to wipe stuff away because we need to do some details. And I can't see them right now. So we have a little bit of green here at the bottom and then the red. So let's put the green in because our brush has still got a fair amount of yellow. And I'm just going to add, we'll use some of this green that we had, a touch of the blue. And we're just going to put it on. The base here. So we're slowly getting into a few details, but nothing much. Let's see if that prints. Yes, just a hint of the green. We're going to have to redo the yellow a little bit anyway. Just maybe a little touch more. It's a bit brushy looking. Okay, right, I think we're ready for our red. I'm going to make sure my brush is reasonably clean. And mixing the red, alizarin crimson, the quinacridone magenta, and just a titch of the orange should give us a pretty good facsimile of the red. I'm not so much going for what nature offers because in the photograph it's quite dark, so we're going to make it up as to what I think it should look like, which is much more important. This is a painting. And I think there was just a hint of the red on the bottom too. I think we're going to put that in and see how that, it probably won't print very well, but and the red, as you can see, is quite intense. So I think we need to just lower it down a tone with a little bit of the violet. And I'm going to introduce my bridge here, that way I have more control over my hand. And we're just going to do that second layer right now. This brush has a nice point to it, so I don't really need to go to a finer brush. And print. And breathe. I really do get quite excited at points. I have to step back and just, you know, let things simmer down a bit. So we have this inner portion yet, and we're going to be working with this section in here. So again, I'm just going to take a lot of the paint off. So here, this middle section, that's quite dark. And I'm going to make it darker yet. I'm going to add the red to that. Because, and here goes the bridge again, there's all these details. So we're going to add some of these little details in here. They're quite interesting little shapes. We might have to add some of the brighter yellow later, but let's put that in and see what it looks like. Ah, yes, you see? Now we can start adding the yellow in there. And that will help sort of smooth it as well, like we did with the water here, so it doesn't look so brushstrokey. Is that a good artistic term, Josh? Okay, quickly here. Yeah, we're just gonna paint around the shapes to some degree. And print. Okay, yes, I'm just showing. So now that final layer of yellow, just to tie things together, in here, here, kind of like this little violet edge there. It looks like a little shadow area. Let's do the stem first. Now the stem is quite a dark green, but it has to be different than the leaves, so I'm not darkening it too much. And it can't be what I call a foreign color. Suddenly you've got a totally different color in your composition here, and so we're going to just put touches here and there of it elsewhere. Let's print that. And that will probably have to wait for one more layer. Okay, so we need to put this highlight on here. We'll put some more green down to begin with. And I just might add more yellow. Then this thing is just straight up and down, so. Little lines on it. Yeah, I think that's good. Okay, a little bit more on here. Use some white. The paint's still fluid on there, so we can just do our mixing right on the plate. Okay, yeah, better. So as we brighten the leaves, you know, that won't be so glaring. And I'm going to wait for the yellows to dry a bit more before we touch that up. So, okay, onto the leaves. And the little shadow, I guess, we'll do last of all. Right, bigger brush again. And now then, now this leaf I think is darker than this one because that's where our highlight's coming from. So that's what we're going to do. So we're going to darken this down. I'm using fairly opaque paint. Ultramarine blue, the touch of the phthalo green, and we're really going to darken around that water lily. And we'll just put a highlight there because that's what makes sense. Just banging in the brush strokes here and changing color slightly as we're getting closer to that edge. Again, mixing a little bit, blending a little bit. The lily's pads don't have a lot of detail. It's just an interesting shape. Okay. Just going to mix a tiny bit more, and really we didn't get enough color on that side. So some more. Just have to pile it on there, I guess. It's a little bit different when you use a brayer where you don't want a lot of paint. In this case, I'm not really loading my brush that heavily, but I am using a fair amount of paint. Now let's see if that makes a difference. Haha. All right. Now, we're just going to change color a little bit. I'm going to add that phthalo green, and then if we add white to it, you see what happens? It grays it a little bit. And that just changes it, makes it a little bit more interesting. Okay, that's our first layer. Okay, we need another layer. And a little bit of the white and a little bit more of the phthalo green there. Just make it a slightly different color. Not much, but enough to give it some interest. That color's in everything else as well, so it's not like, again, we're introducing something foreign, and I'll put it in here as well on the shadow side. There. I'll take it off there a little bit. See what happens. A little bit more. Okay, and I like the stem. See that those colors coordinate. So we just want that to be a little the same tone but a little bit browner. And dark up in here where it's underneath. And around the lily pad. Lots of paint. Now we're going to put it around here because it's really the same color, but that water droplet has highlights. You can see it right there. And then there's an edge here. And that will make that stem stand out. Make sure there's no globby things and print. I think a lot of artists have trouble resolving those last little parts of a painting. And the way to get around that is to look at it and see, does it need anything more? And if it doesn't, leave it alone. But we're not at that stage yet. If you can't think of anything, then just forget about it. So we got this, and maybe a little bit more green in the background. So looking at it, yeah, we really need to have more paint there. And I think I'll add some of that green and just as it comes through here, we can brighten things up. And maybe it'll pick up the color. We're having just a little bit of an issue with the print picking up color because we haven't really dried it in between. Ideally, you should wait maybe an hour or so between, but who wants to do that? So we're not doing that. You just have to load the paint a little bit. It will print eventually. Especially if you're using these staining colors. This is another reason why you want to use a really good quality paper. This Bristol type paper. There you go. So we have all the different colors of green, which is really nice as well. And let's just add that to this section. I'm not going to worry about the highlight. We'll put it in. We're just going to paint this lovely little shape. Okay. And with the highlight in it, I think it will say what it's supposed to say. So okay, so our shadow color here. And shadows are usually 40% darker than everything else. If you have one of those gray charts, you can check on that. There's a video by Laurel Hart where she talks about this very well. It is a watercolor painting, of course, but it applies to all kinds of other painting. Shadows are both transparent and they're a bit darker. So that's what you have to be concerned about. So we're going to use our magenta and our violet. So it's going to be both darker. Maybe a bit more of this cerulean blue in it. Let's try this and just see what happens here. I'm going to have to wipe away the green a little bit, but it's okay. So here's our shadow. It goes into the green. Such an interesting shape. I didn't put it in the other one, and then I regretted it. I should have. And that's the lily. The stem and everything. Okay, let's see what happens. Oh, there we are. Getting so excited I forget where everything is. Painting is a blast. I have to admit it. Ah, yes, you see? So we can actually take it up a little bit and just do some blending here. And it's covering the green nicely. Should be a little bit darker there. So in here, and we need to blend between here and here. Up in here somewhere. So we'll make a transition to the shadow. Okay. So it really helps when you're setting your colors out. I set them from warm to cool. And then I stick the violet away from everything else because it's so strong that if you get into it accidentally, then you have a problem. So I usually stick it out by itself. That and the white usually goes somewhere else. So just a trick for keeping your paints organized. Now, let's hope. All right, so back to the blue, I think, and around here, and around the shadow. So blue and violet, some of that. So here, close to our it's this breaking thing again, and just so it's not just a bunch of brush strokes again, because we had this nice passage. Oh yes, we're getting there. And just close to here. And up here by the... And maybe we'll add the white in and see if that prints. We can but try. Not too much. where else did we have a highlight around this thing here? Except picked up a little bit of blue, but is that a bad thing? Okay. I daren't put that brush there because it'll make a blob. Okay. Nice. Well, I don't mind the shadow being a little bit on the rough. I think we're just gonna maybe shore it up a tiny bit. It's kind of transparent in here, that's perfect. And then, all right, yep. So the last thing we have to do is just, is the flower itself. And I've managed to get myself covered again. But that's what wipes are for. So it's very subtle, a little edge of where the water is coming on. There's a few little spots that could be touched up, but I'm reasonably happy with things. I think just trying to find a nice brush for our yellows. And we certainly have the shapes, you know, you've got all the different greens. Now we're just going to concentrate on our yellows. And we'll keep it bright. Might have to put a little bit more yellow down. So here, where's the worst of it? On here. And here. There's an edge, I think that just ended up being violet, which is just lovely, which we'll leave alone. See how that prints. We might just have to do the rigger. Okay, I don't know how we got a couple of globs on here, but we can take that off. Okay, and just that edge there. Just mix the white. Just turning my brush. We just want no globs, just, there must be a nicer term for that. But right now I haven't thought of it. I'm going to put some in here too. And then on the outside edges of this, I kind of like the violet on there, so we're going to leave that alone. There's this part and tops of this. See where we're at here. Just in here, I wanted this to be amalgamated a little bit more. maybe on our highlight side. Almost done. Yes. And I'm just going to put a wee bit of color on there. And then wipe it back, and you can just flip it onto the... If there's an area that bothers you, deal with it. Don't leave it alone. I think we're done. And there we have shapes. And we will show this in the final. So there you have it. You must try this because it really is an awful lot of fun. And we could probably go on for a few more layers, but you know, time is of the essence, and I think you get the gist of it. And I'm not totally unhappy with it. I think it worked very well in terms of shape. So thanks for joining me, and we'll see you again another time. Don't forget to like and subscribe and share if you can. We really appreciate it, and it helps our channel to grow. So bye for now.